guys, it's Striker here, and I'm about to head to Spooky Empire for day 2. Yesterday I was volunteering all day, so I wasn't able to get any footage. And today, I wasn't originally planning to volunteer, but since my friend is leaving me out of Danny Elfman's photo op, I decided to volunteer. And then I'm hoping that I can get into Danny Elfman's panel at least, since I'm being excluded from the Danny Elfman photo op. And I'm kind of bummed about it because the whole reason I got her to volunteer, and I'm the one that's driving us both, I kind of wish that I was still included, because she also promised me when we started, when I suggested it, if we can go and I can take her, that she would take me in the photo op. And then now I'm being excluded after last week or whatever, when she said she was gonna probably do the duo since Danny was sold out. But I really like his music from Nightmare Before Christmas and then Batman and Batman Begins, because Batman's like my favorite superhero movie of all time. And genre, like I literally went with her to go have, well, she's also in Scooby-Doo, but I had her sign my Mystery Man because I didn't have anything Catwoman related, but she was a 1992 animated voice actress for Catwoman. Adriana Barbera or whatever you pronounce the last name. But I'm also hoping tomorrow I can get into the panel for Jessica Roth and the Hollow Scream panel, because I love Happy Death Day. Rob Mello doesn't unfortunately have a panel, but I'll go ahead and film what I can today if I can get into the Elfman panel, and that'll be the only panel I'll do today. And then I'm gonna walk around and explore, because I mostly only looked at the Tech 2 area on the way out, since that was open till 11 p.m. last night. Okay, bye. See you soon.
A couple house rules. We do have a microphone located right down in front, so start thinking about your questions now. For time purposes, it's only going to be one question per person. Everyone got it? Cool? All right, well, I say let's just get this panel underway. Spooky Empire, it is my absolute privilege to bring to the stage the one and only. How's it going? You've been super busy today. How's the day been?
Yeah, it was a crazy day. What can I say? It's, things go really fast.
Well, thank you so much for being here, especially here in Orlando.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's only appropriate to start by asking about Dark Universe, which I know you're
The film I was just here in Orlando, and it's crazy. It's like, I told my family, you're heading out over, where are you going? Orlando. You were just in Orlando. Yeah, I know. Coincidence. But Dark Universe was great, you know, because I spent about 2 years on that project, and it was really, well, I worked on a couple of rides. I did a ride for Disneyland Hong Kong and Disneyland Shanghai. And so watching them go from the ground up is always really exciting, but never anything as extensive as an entire park, you know, with music for all these different areas. So fortunately, they were a great team to work with. And so watching it go from drawings to renderings to 3D renderings to actually getting pictures of them on the building site was really a treat.
Was there any difference, or is there any difference in composing for like a movie or a TV show versus for something at a theme park?
Well, yes and no. I mean, because you're still composing music for a character or a situation or whatever it is, but rather than having a beginning and an end, you're creating loops Usually, for a lot of I mean, for the rides, they have beginnings and ends, but most of the things, you know, you have to write it in a way that somewhere you can get it just to go back to the top, because it's going to be playing continuously. So other than that, it's not really that different.
Do you remember like the time when maybe you realized in particular that you had a special kind of fingerprint? And like, how would you describe the Danny Elfman sound?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing that always makes me happiest is when there's end credits and my name comes up and people go, "Oh, that didn't sound like Danny." That's my greatest compliment. But I don't know. You know, obviously I've done a lot of very quirky films, so you know, people identify me with a quirky sound. But I like to think that I can write for many genres. I tried to model myself after a composer named Bernard Herrmann and a more contemporary composer named Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah.
And what I loved about them is they could write for any genre. You know, Bernard Herrmann, I grew up as a kid listening to the scores he did for the science fiction movies that I loved. Jason and the Argonauts and the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. These movies with stop motion animation by Ray Harryhausen. And so I eagerly awaited the next collaboration of Harryhausen's animation and Bernard Herrmann's music. And so that's how I thought of Bernard Herrmann. And then as I got older and became kind of a film buff, I said, oh, he did Citizen Kane. Oh, he did these incredible group of Alfred Hitchcock movies. So, and he could write a very romantic score. And he could write, you know, Ghost and Mrs. Muir. He could write a kind of a comic score. And so that's what stuck in my head, is the ability to go from one thing to another. And I think that's what attracted me to film scoring. I used to get frustrated in the band because, you know, I had to write kind of not the same thing, but you're expected to do something that satisfies your audience. And as a composer, you're not. And that was a great freedom for me, that I could follow a really big bombastic movie with something that's very romantic, with something that's very dark, with something that's very silly, and something that sometimes it's really a big score and sometimes it's just a half dozen instruments. So I loved that ability to ping pong up and back all around.
Well, with all the ping ponging, do you ever put in like any Easter eggs that only maybe you would know about or your diehard fans would know about in your music?
No, well, I mean, I probably do, but not consciously. You know, I'm sure that there are things, but you know, an Easter egg really is kind of preparing you for the next round of something, like the next installment. So, in a music sense, that'd be kind of hard to do, because first off, you never know if you're ever going to do that again. You know, it's seldom that I was working on something that I knew there was going to be a part 2 or a part 3. You know, so I didn't know when I wrote Men in Black that I'd do 4 of them. I wasn't going to put an Easter egg because I never knew if I would do another one. Whereas if you're working on something that's episodic, you could, I guess, perhaps lay a little Easter egg of look for this in the next episode, because you know what you're going to do. But I don't usually have that luxury.
And I know you've also performed even at Coachella. And I want to know, what is it like getting to perform with almost a full orchestra behind you?
Well, I'd been performing for about 10 years before Coachella with doing a show called Elfman Burton, where I do many suites of Tim Burton's music, and then I would sing songs from Nightmare Before Christmas. And so that's what kind of got me performing again, but it was limited. It was just performing Jack Skellington. And then we started doing Nightmare Before Christmas live, but it was still doing more songs, but still Jack Skellington. So Coachella was the big turnaround, because I hadn't performed as myself in over 25 years. And, you know, quarter century is a kind of a long break. And so to say that I was not feeling particularly confident and secure is an understatement. But I didn't even know if it came off okay until it was done. My manager was looking online, you know, looking at Instagram and Twitter, and going, oh, people were liking it. You know, so, and then since then, now we've done more, and I really enjoyed that. But it was a big leap because I didn't ever expect to come back and do that again.
Yeah, it's cool, down to the visuals as well that we got to see. It's really, really neat. Since you did mention the wonderful Tim Burton, obviously you guys have had a beautiful collaborative relationship throughout the years. I want to know, what is your favorite thing about working with Tim Burton?
Well, I mean, now in hindsight, I realized that first off, you know, he gave me some wildly imaginative stuff, but he had me on what we would call a very long leash. In other words, some directors keep you on a tight leash and you wander at all from what they think they want, and they kind of beat you back into line. And Tim was always very much like, he wouldn't tell me what to do. I would just go off and do it. And then when there was music to play him, of course, you know, he had his opinion, naturally. But it was a very long leash. He let me wander. You know, for example, when I wrote the theme to Edward Scissorhands, I was like, oh, Tim's going to hate this. Because it sounds kind of like Eastern European. And in fact, it sounds like, you know, almost like Eastern Europe people. Some directors would listen and go, he's not an Eastern European Jew. So why are you writing what sounds like a Jewish, Eastern European, Lithuanian theme or somewhere, you know, from Hungary? And it was. And I'm not, you know, I was aware of that too. And so when I played it for him, I was hoping he would go, you know, not make that kind of comment, that literal comment, because unfortunately he doesn't think that way. You know, he thinks just strictly how he feels about something, not like, is this the right type of music from the right type of genre, from the right type of place or background that would, first off, what kind of background would you have for a created creature that has no genetic information whatsoever? But the point is that some directors would have like kind of criticized me for that, and Tim didn't, and I really appreciate that quality of Tim, that if he feels it, he goes with it, whether it makes any logical sense or not. Also, I kind of had two themes for Edward, and no themes for anybody else in the story. And that was just happened that way. And again, some directors will go, well, you need this and that. And I just felt like, no, these two themes are covering the two sides of his personality, this kind of magical thing, and you know, this sad side to him. And so he fell right into that. And now in hindsight, I realize how rare that is. You know, now that I've done about 110 films, I look back and I go, that was just a real gift. I was able to have that leeway to do what I was feeling.
So would you say, writing for Edward Scissorhands, would you say that was one of your biggest creative risks that you've taken, or what would you say is...
No, everything I did back then was a risk, because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. So I wasn't thinking about risks at that point. I was just thinking about learning how to do it better. You know, my first 20 films, you know, Pee-wee was number 1, Beetlejuice was number 5, Batman was number 10, Edward was number 14, almost to 15. At a certain point, Tim is going, how are you able to do 4 films between each one of my films and you're in the band? I go, because I'm trying to learn how to be a film composer, and each of your films are asking more of me. And if I didn't do 9 films before Batman, I wouldn't have been able to do Batman. If I didn't do 4 before Beetlejuice, I wouldn't have been able to pull it off. I was really training myself hard between each of his films. And so it wasn't about risk-taking. It was just about hanging on by the, you know, seat of my pants more.
So if it's okay with you, like I did mention, we have a microphone, so now's your opportunity to ask. Just once again, I ask for time. We do 1 question per person, so, all right.
Okay, now I can go first.
Utter chaos, I love it.
Sorry, because her hair was in the way.
All right, let's keep it quiet so we can go moving along. You're up first, my friend. What's your name?
Steven.
I have to send me some of those.
This is Steven, everybody. Go ahead, what's your question?
I'm going even further back. I was wondering, how did you and the band wind up in Dangerfield's Back to School?
I don't even know. I think, you know, the producers or somebody said, we need a band in this scene. It was written in the script, I'm sure a band's performing. and the whole scene as it happens. And that's where I first met Robert Downey Jr. Actually was the mixing engineer that causes feedback that makes me go, ah, like that. And we joked about that later, many years later. And at that moment, somebody in the production said, oh, that Oingo Boingo band, they're pretty fun to watch. Let's put them in there. It'll be crazy. So I have no idea how it happened, other than we got the call and we were like, yeah, sure, we'll be in a movie and do one of our songs.
Cool, thanks. It's a great scene too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, what's your name?
Hi, my name's Arena. Thank you. Is there any piece of music that we might be really familiar with that originally sounded completely different, either from your own input and taking a different direction, or input from a director?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of scores, sometimes I'm lucky and I hit it right off the bat. First idea becomes the one, but more often than that, it's not. So, like, Big Fish is a score that I'm very fond of, but it was a real journey to get there. I wrote a lot of ideas. There was nothing obvious of what type of tone. It was such a weird tone and this emotional undercurrent. So it was really like what we ended up with was not my first idea at all. A more extreme example of that was the movie Milk that I wrote for Gus Van Sant, because Gus's first idea was that Harvey Milk loved opera, so the score should be operatic. And I wrote 10, 15 minutes of this opera-inspired music, and then a couple other pieces. And then first time I sat down to play for him, I was playing it for him, and he looked at me and he goes, it's not really working, is it? Happens, and then sometimes I'm just pure lucky, like, if I spent like a month trying to really find out what the feel and the music was for Big Fish, Mars Attacks, I had the whole theme in my head when I saw the movie for the first time, and it was like a black and white animatic of the flying saucers, and I heard the whole theme, and I had to stop and run out of the screening room and like just make a bunch of notes out in the lobby, and that became the main theme to the movie. So sometimes it's like bingo like that, and sometimes it's really an uphill struggle, and then you find it, and then you go, ah, oh, thank God.
Thank you. Big Fish turned out wonderful.
Thank you.
Hey, what's your name?
Hello, Mr. Elfman. My name is Sean. I hope you enjoyed the chocolate-covered Oreos I gave you earlier.
Well, I will enjoy them. I haven't had a chance to enjoy them yet, but I intend to. Thank you.
So my question for you is, I have a copy of your Dead Man's Party musical score, and it's written in G-flat major, E-flat minor. I was just wondering why you chose to write it in that key.
What, you mean the song?
Yeah.
Not the musical score, you mean the song?
The song, yeah.
The Oingo Boingo song.
The Oingo Boingo song, sorry.
Well, I don't know what key it says it's in. I never think about what key I'm in, ever. And especially if I'm writing a song. I mean, I literally just writing for a key because I'm messing around and I'm singing and I like where the key is for my voice. And I won't even care or think about what key it's in. So whatever was listed on a piece of music, what is it?
G-flat major, E-flat minor.
I have no idea what kind of but that was somebody else deciding that it was somewhere between these two keys, I guess. I couldn't even begin to tell you, because when you're in a band, nobody's thinking about that. You come in, I'd come in with a guitar and a little cassette with a demo, and I'd just be playing the piece and singing it. And then everybody's kind of falling into one by one, picking up their lines and picking up the pieces, but not thinking about what key it's in.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would have been the perfect film for a Oingo Boingo soundtrack. Do you agree with this?
Batman Forever?
Yes. The one with frickin' Jim Carrey, Riddler, all that,
I actually don't know.
Spandex?
No, after Batman Returns, I kind of like, you know, the next couple that came out, I was like, oh, these are like, I don't know what these are. I didn't run out and see them.
What's a film that you do think would be very just like aesthetically perfect for an Oingo Boingo soundtrack?
I don't think there is a film. It would have to be a pretty silly film.
That's why I picked Batman Forever.
Okay, well, now I have to go back and see Batman Forever, and then I'll tell you if Oingo Boingo could have done the score. But it's an interesting concept. I really thought about that.
Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you.
You're welcome.
Come on down. Hi, what's up, Jane?
Hi. Okay, so we heard a little bit about your musical influences when you first got started. Who is a new artist or somebody current who inspires you now?
Artists that inspire me now. You're talking about the music, songs, film?
Anything that's current?
Oh boy.
I have thinker questions, yeah.
I'm really bad at this.
You're doing great.
I'd have to go look at my Spotify and get back to you. You know, I tend to get into I have a really bad habit of I'll listen to obsessively to certain bands and certain things for a long time, and then I'm not aware of what's out there. And then every 5 years, I'll catch up and I'll hear a bunch of new stuff and go, wow, that's really good. But who's inspiring me right now? I'm working in so many genres, it's hard to say, because right now I'm on a film score, but I'm also on a classical commission. So I'm listening to a lot of classical music, and so
There's
my
not
brain...
a lot of current classical.
No, there's not a lot of current classical. And so my brain is pretty mixed up on influences right now, you know, so somewhere between Prokofiev and Nine Inch Nails and Jerry Goldsmith and you know, there's a lot of influences out there that are all jumbled together.
Thank you.
Wouldn't you like to hear something between Shostakovich and Nine Inch Nails?
That's the new classic.
Yeah.
You know.
Hi. My question is, which one of the films that you've done would you like to be seen adapted into a Broadway show?
None, because I generally hate Broadway shows. And there's a reason why I've never been asked to write a Broadway show, because I can't stand 90% of them. And the few that I really do like generally weren't written for Broadway. That's my whole theory about the good Broadway shows. The best shows weren't written for Broadway. They became Broadway shows. Even West Side Story wasn't written for Broadway. But more currently, you know, I think of favorites like Sweeney Todd was not designed as a Broadway show. And Hamilton, even, you know, as much as I loved it, it was not designed as a Broadway show. It became a Broadway show after working small markets for a long time. And to me, the more interesting shows like that, they're interesting because they didn't start out aiming for Broadway, because Broadway is very similar to what I see as pop songs, pop music market, and I see it as mostly manufactured off of a press to just continue something that's already popular. So pop music, I have a strong distaste for, even though every now and then something becomes a pop song that's really popular, and I go, that's really interesting. But that's because it broke through from some other thing. And it's the same with Broadway. You know, I'll see a show and it's really interesting. And if I look at the history of it, it was not designed for Broadway. It was designed for off-Broadway or off-Broadway or West End London or some kind of college like Hamilton, you know, was literally done within a, what do you call it, you know, a laboratory, you know, a music lab. And then suddenly, you know, you have something fresh and original. But there's just not a lot of fresh originality for the last 40 years, in my mind, that I've heard on Broadway. So I would love to do something someday, but if somebody approached me and said, we're designing a Broadway thing, that means we want Broadway hits. Then I'm gonna go, fuck you. Just want to, we want a pop album. That's why, can you write some pop hits? So I'll go, no. I'd have to kill myself. And so it's kind of the same thing. Broadway, pop music. And in either one of them, something wonderful is going to happen. Every now and then, every year or two, something really interesting is going to pop up. But that's going to be the surprise thing.
Okay, thank you.
That's an elaborate thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to be so negative about a whole genre. I know.
You're alone. Hey, what's your name?
Hey there, my name's Mike. At the risk of asking what your favorite child is, in all of your projects, have you ever had that one moment that this is it? This is your aha moment. I'm where I need to be. I'm doing what I'm meant to do. Is there any score or even in Oingo Boingo or previous bands that you had that moment?
I don't know. Having started with Tim, I think, part of him did rub off on me. I've never heard him say anything more than, I think the movie came out pretty interesting. And that's usually how I feel about my scores. I think it came out interesting. But I never, ever felt that I'd written something brilliant when I was done with it, or that I just nailed it and I couldn't do it better. There isn't a score I've written that if I didn't run out of time, I wouldn't have been trying to improve it and improve it and improve it. So the reason why the score ends up the way it does is because the clock runs out and it's done. Otherwise, I'd still be working on Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So, no, there's not anything that I've done that made me go, aha, this is it, I'm the shit.
Thank you.
Hey.
Hi again.
Hey again.
Hi, my name is Monica. First off, it is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Elfman. Again, it's gracious, and I say this on behalf of myself and with everyone else coming here to be able to meet with you. I'm just kind of curious to know if you had to give words of wisdom or advice to your child self or younger self, what would you give them?
I would try to teach my younger self to suck, because I almost burned a lot of bridges early on just because I found that I had kind of a short fuse when I thought something came down in a way that was really throwing me off the track, or I was being insulted by something, or I was offended. I'd get offended easily, and I was too much of a hothouse flower to exist. And I think to survive as a film composer, you have to develop a very thick skin. And in my case, I had a big blow up with Tim at the end of Nightmare Before Christmas, and I said I'd never work with him again. And then a year later, I missed him terribly. And I realized it was just a stupid decision. I was over emotional. And if I could go back to those days, I would say when you feel very emotional, like somebody has said, something went down that made you get very upset or hurt your feelings, to try to back up and look at it through a telescope where you're backing it. And now look at the same picture from a distance and see, does it still feel that important? Is it that important to have a tantrum over, to walk away, to possibly burn the bridge? And 99 out of 100 times, the answer would be definitely not. That was just a thing, it happened. It's the kind of thing I should have been angry about for 2 days and then been over. But I was a little bit too, sensitive. And so I learned lessons. And fortunately, Tim felt the same way about me. And 2 years later, he called me and said, do you ever want to work together, through his producer? And I was on a plane the next day, and that was for Mars Attacks. And we just hugged and said, let's just reset. And, I've had a number of moments like that. So, but they could have turned out poorly. And I used to joke with Tim, for example, that Bernard Herrmann and Alfred Hitchcock, which I thought was the most fertile composer-director relationship ever, they had a blow-up over the movie Torn Curtain, and they never spoke again. and he never did another score again. And I thought, what a tragedy. And I said, if we're not careful, we'll end up like that. And we almost did, but then we didn't. And so that would be the lesson. I'd go back and say, when you really feel that feeling, back up and calm down, take a deep breath, and really look at, is it worth, letting things go? And that would have helped me out. But I learned, I learned the hard way.
Okay. I know that this probably sounds very monotonous, and I apologize from that. You probably hear it a lot from your fans, but I thank you so much for your influence, allowing me to find the voice that needed to be found at 13. So I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
What's your name?
Hello, my name is Jacob. Mr. Elfman, I'm a musician, as a performer. I guess my question would be, if you had any advice for musicians and performers who are making their way in various stages, no matter what the stage of their career, anything that you would impart to them just based on your experiences and the success you've had?
Well, I don't know. I mean, and also the success I've had has been up and down and up and down, my whole life. There's been no, I've had lucky breaks, but I've had no easy street for anything. And I would really just say persistence is the most important thing. If you listen to any composer or musician's story, they'll tell you that they ended up being in the right place at the right time if they got successful. Everybody successful has that story. But what they had to go through to get to that place is different for everybody. And sometimes it's a long, painful process of hanging in there until you get to the right door opening at the right time. So persistence is really, I think, the most important thing.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Mormon. My question is, growing up, your work, everything you've done, I would not be the human I am today without you and what you've done. And I'm pretty sure that's probably a lot about the people in this room. Was there a moment?
Thank you.
So was there a moment where you looked this direction and went, wow, I'm making a difference?
Only to the sense that my first 7, 8, 9, 10 years as a film composer, almost all the composers in Hollywood hated me. And in hindsight, although it really bothered me at the time, now I look back and go, that's the best thing that could have happened to me. Because I found that I'm really fueled by negative energy. Most people like positive energy, but the negative thing, then I dig in and go, I'll show those motherfuckers. There was a lot of that when I started out. After I wrote Beetlejuice, my agent was at a table full of composers at an award ceremony where I got an award, and they were all grumbling themselves, like, well, Elfman didn't write Oompa, 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 Oompa. Of course, I wrote Oompa. And then when he told me that, I go, yeah, but all those motherfuckers are going to be imitating me in the next 2 years in some sport that they're doing, and fuck them anyhow. Because, it's just a nasty thing to say about a composer. That would be like saying John Williams didn't write bum, 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 bum. He didn't write 2 notes, half notes going up and down. What's the big deal? He didn't write that. He didn't invent that. Well, the fact is, he did when he was revolving around a shark. He thought of it. And anybody else can go later, that's so simple. He didn't invent that. That's the easiest thing in the world. Yeah, asshole, but you didn't do it. You did it in the right way at the right time, and then every time you're out, and your director's got something coming at you in the water, could you do something like boom, 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 boom? And so, it's like sometimes it's just coming across a certain field. And so after Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands, I started realizing that even though people hated me, I was hearing myself done a lot in a lot of other scores. And And so there was a certain satisfaction in, they may hate me, but their directors are forcing them to do me. And I know it drives them crazy. And then after about a decade, that kind of disappeared. But, everybody thought in the beginning that I didn't write my own music. And, it really bothered me because I was working so hard at it, like really, really hard. And my attitude was like, you don't have to like what I do, but give me credit for doing the work, because I definitely do the work, even if you don't like it. But in the end, it worked out perfectly. And I mean, the exception, by the way, was the old composers were really kind to me. It was all the composers my age hated me because I came from a rock band, and that was just considered, you just don't come from a rock band. And I admitted in an interview that I was untrained. I never went to music school. And then that was like my death knell. It's like, you can't not go to music school and do what you're doing. But at the same time, Jerry Goldsmith was kind to me. He would write me little notes. After Batman came out, when Oscar nominations, I got this funny telegram. It says, "You was robbed." And it says, "Hank." And I call my agent and I go, "Who the hell is Hank?" And he goes, "That's Henry Mancini." And I thought, that's the kindest thing anybody had ever said to me at that point. And then when I met Elmer Bernstein in a seminar, we really bonded. And so the weird thing is that the older guys were secure enough that I didn't threaten them, and they were actually, like Henry Mancini, what a kind thing to say to, a young composer struggling up. But all the ones of my generation were like, as soon as we find that bastard, that whoever's got chained up in his dungeon, he's writing his music, he's a one-hit wonder and he'll be out of here. We'll get him out of here. And so now 110 films later, I can go, guess not.
All right, we have about 10 minutes left. So, all right, what's up, Luigi?
Hello, Mr. Elfman. Thank you so much for coming to Spooky Empire. Sorry if I'm too loud. Is that for you?
You're perfect.
Okay, good. And then again, Mr. Elfman, I'm a huge fan of a lot of your work, like all your work actually, from Pee-wee's Big Adventure all the way to Spider-Man, all the way to Beetlejuice and Nightmare Before Christmas. Do you have a favorite day of your career, or of your life, or any aspect of your life in particular?
A favorite what?
A favorite day of your life or career, whichever, if you have a favorite.
I don't have a favorite day, but I have to say one of the most, one of the best things, when anybody who's worked on many, many films, you at a certain point you realize most films fail, and sometimes the films that you work super hard on, that are out for 10 minutes, you work just as hard as the one that became a big hit that everybody knows, and there's a lot of, that's just the nature of movies. And so up until Nightmare Before Christmas, everything I'd worked on was about 3 months. That would be normal to work on a movie. Nightmare Before Christmas I worked on for 2 years. And so it came out and it wasn't understood. And I did a press junket before it came out, and the press really didn't like it. And I said, this is not going well. And Disney started pulling all of their marketing. Not because they didn't like it, they didn't understand it. They didn't understand, and I get it. They didn't have a way to comprehend what it was. This was not The Little Mermaid. And when they previewed it for kids, and kids hated it, because a bunch of kids were expecting The Little Mermaid, and they got Nightmare Before Christmas done unfinished, And so I remember them all saying, oh, kids hate it. And I knew that wasn't true, but this one preview went terribly, and it wasn't until a decade later, when I was in Japan with Tim Burton for the opening of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, there was Nightmare Before Christmas merchandise everywhere, all over Tokyo, and Tim was like, I never even seen half this stuff, and there was this kind of understanding that it hadn't really died. And then Disney, I don't know whether he went to Disney or whether they just picked up on the fact that, we understand this now. And they started re-releasing it and putting all this marketing energy into it, which most studios wouldn't do. They'd go, that ship has sailed. And then decades later, to have it be so popular with kids is my greatest pleasure. So like the greatest surprise of everything, if I could have had a wish of one film that I worked on really hard that didn't do well when it came out and wished for it to have a second life, it would have been that one. And it did. And second lives are very rare in films. You know, Wizard of Oz is the most famous, didn't do that well and became famous later. You know, there are films like Donnie Darko and, you know, others that kind of become cult popularity after the fact and kind of get a second life. But it's extraordinarily rare. So the fact that that one did is the great surprise and the great pleasure to me. So it's not like a day, but it's a thing that made me most happy in terms of like if I could wish for something and the wish happened. And my greatest joy is when people are always sending me like little videos of their kids singing songs, and I go, I always knew that, you know, kids. I wrote it thinking of kids, and when all the press was going, kids are going to hate this movie. You know, I came out to Orlando, Florida, for the press junket before Epic, for Universal. The last time I was here was for the press junket for Nightmare Before Christmas. And it was 2 days of doing about 200 interviews, and every interview was like 2 minutes long, and they were all exactly the same. So kids hated. Who's the movie for? No, kids, it's too scary for kids, right? No. Are they scared of Halloween? No, they love Halloween. Well, then the movie's not too scary. Well, no. We hear that Santa Claus gets tortured. He's not tortured. He's inconvenienced. And he's not even that angry about it afterwards. He's okay with it. So, that was a very depressing time because it just looked like nobody got this thing and everybody's convinced that kids hated it. So now when I go and perform, you know, Nightmare Before Christmas at the Hollywood Bowl, of course I never expected that I would sing this stuff live. Leastwise, when they said, well, we're going to go to the Hollywood Bowl, I was like, no, how about a little 500-seat theater? And then I look out there and everybody's got their kids. It's like, that was like my great joy. It just felt like, yes.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Okay, what's your name?
Hi, my name is Matthew. Thank you for being here today. The Nightmare Before Christmas was, you know, my first movie I ever became obsessed with, and it shaped a lot of who I am today. So my question to you is, earlier you mentioned that, you know, you did, before Epic, you did Mystic Manor, and then you did something at Shanghai Disneyland, but many years ago, the first theme park attraction you did any major work for was Haunted Mansion Holiday over at Disneyland.
Well, but that's actually a misconception because I didn't actually do anything for that. The first year I heard, oh, they're turning Haunted Mansion into a Jack Skellington nightmare thing. I thought, oh, cool. And they sent a car to pick me up. I didn't know what they had done. I didn't do personally any work at all. And then I got a call from my agent saying, don't get in the car. They didn't use any of your music. And I go, what? No, this is kind of how a lot of parks work. They hired their own people to do stuff that sounded like it. And it was like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. But again, Disney, they're really good about seeing the long picture. You know, they saw the long picture on Nightmare, and they got behind it. Most companies wouldn't. And then the next year, they totally redid it. And now they were using my music. But I didn't personally score music for the Haunted Mansion, but I was delighted with what they did. I thought it was, you know, it was just what I was hoping it would be. And the fact that they did that was just such a surprise. And when I did Mystic Manor for Disneyland Hong Kong, it was actually a tribute to the Haunted Mansion. Even to the point where, you know, there's this point in the Haunted Mansion where you're coming around a corner and you see these kind of holographic faces singing their little, I'm trying to think of the melody right now. And they're singing like that, and I had to do a tribute to that in Mystic Manor with these 3 coats of armor that are singing with faces, and I made it so they were singing in unison, in harmony, just like these holograph faces in Haunted Mansion, because the whole thing was kind of a tribute to the Haunted Mansion. The difference is in that Chinese culture, you don't have ghosts the same way in Western culture. Ghosts are more like ancestors that are revered as opposed to like scary, kind of a thing. So they made it a wicked, a crazy spirit taking over rather than ghosts. But it was still my tribute to Haunted Mansion, very much so.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for one final question. Nate, what's your name?
Hi, I'm Dakota. I know you've done a lot of work in the past and have made music for loads of different types of genres, but is there a style of writing or an energy that you'd like to capture in future work if given the opportunity?
Oh, I don't know. You know, it's like every composer dreams of like this broad landscape that, you know, it's like, sure, do I want to get my chance to do a Lawrence of Arabia or a Godfather or a Psycho or whatever, you know, like these perfect vehicles for music, of course. But I don't have a single genre. I'm happy when I'm able to really go between anything that's very anything. If it's very silly, I'm happy. If it's very romantic, I'm happy. If it's very intense, I'm happy. If it's very dark, I'm happy. If it's wishy-washy in the middle, I'm usually kind of miserable. And I learned very early on to stay away from contemporary romantic comedies. The first one I got, I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't come up with one note. I didn't know, what are these people? They're contemporary humans in American culture. I don't know anything about them. What kind of music they play, what they're doing. They're not very anything. The exception would have been Silver Lining Playbooks, because they were damaged, and their damage made them interesting, so I was able to find my way into their characters. But as long as it's gonna vary anything, I'm happy.
Great question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been such a delight.